So, um, so for those of you just tuning in now, here's the sound when you see this recording later. So focusing on the poster. Um, you might have one of two general formats for that. It might be the more structured / traditional version of, what kind of abstract you submitted with a background, methods, results, and conclusions. So that's the structure we're generally taught. I think it's also important to remind us that there is the alternative uh, format of an abstract that would include issues, a description of what you did, lessons learned, and then the recommendations based on that. So I'm not sure which you all are doing in this case, but just a reminder that it doesn't always have to fall onto the left side. Hello. So before you start laying things on the page and being like, I need to get this on the poster, think about the message you want people to take away from the poster. If you were able to sum up the intent of your poster in a sentence or two, what would it be? And then use that to guide you through the rest of the poster. So that'll help you decide, does this need to go on the poster or not? How big does it need to be? Where does it go? And again, a reminder that not everything you want to convey needs to be on the poster. It may also be helpful to create a list of the visuals you might use to share your message with a viewer. And then you can, if you were going to describe your project with only visuals, what would that be? And then you can write the text to elaborate on those visuals. I recognize that that can sometimes be challenging. I think that many of you are in the Department of Social, Behavioral, and Population Sciences, not all of you, but it is often difficult to depict that, particularly to depict our work without people. If you do include people, make sure you have their permission to put their face on your poster. So just some things to think about, like recognizing that it may feel challenging and there might be some ways that you can depict it anyway. Do they have access to the 2 documents I sent or not yet? No, that I sent this morning? No, okay. I was just confused by that. I don't think so, sorry. I was like, okay, so later you will get access to a template that might help you walk through some of the things that I'm sharing. So in terms of how you can support the guiding message of your poster, your title. What's a simple and intriguing way to say what your project is about? Sometimes that's in the form of a question, rather than just like making a statement. In terms of the intro and background or issues, depending on which format you're following of the abstract, what are some basic things a visitor might need to know to understand your project? Public health is really broad. You all are in multiple different, you're in several different programs. And so while we all have some basic understandings, shared understandings, it may be helpful to give a little more context. Like if somebody's coming to read your poster, what's something they might need to know to understand the rest of it? So give some thought to that. And this might lie in what's your motivation for doing the work that you're doing, so that anybody can understand it. In terms of materials and methods or the description, again, depending on which way you went, how is your project set up? What work did you do? Are there any visuals that might help the visitor better understand or be more interested, that they see something across the room and they're like, oh, I want to know more. And then results or lessons learned. What happened? What additional information was gained by doing this project? Depending on the context of your poster, you might also be sharing a life lesson you learned. And that question comes from when I do this presentation in relation to end of the year practicum report backs. But that might hold true in this case as well. And then if there's any figures or tables that can help depict that. If you do include figures or tables, and so that might be like a flow chart or a table of data that, yes, you could say it in words, but maybe it'll take you 5 sentences to say something that can just be captured in a table. Whichever you do, make sure to include captions so that if a person glances at that figure or table, they understand what it is that they're looking at. Whoops. Okay. And then discussion. What do your results mean? And then conclusion and significance or recommendations. Based on your results, what conclusion did you reach or conclusions? What do they mean? What's their significance? What might be future research in this area? And then what do you recommend next steps might be based on what you learned? And then also you want to include on your poster, what literature did you cite? Who would you like to acknowledge for their help and or funding? So we'll look at a couple of examples. In terms of how to emphasize your message, this may or may not hold true here, but I think it still holds true to a degree because, all of us will be there. Again, we're from 3 different programs. Other people from the school will be there. Our community partners will be there. So we still have a range of people. This definitely holds true in a conference setting, but I think it holds true in this setting too, that you're designing for multiple audiences. And we'll get to that more in a minute. It's also helpful to lay out in a column format so that a reader can read down and then read down and then read down. It's helpful to use headers and fonts to guide visitors without getting too wild about it. And so that a visitor can easily tell how it's organized and what's important. It's also important to differentiate data, summaries, and conclusions. You want to keep it simple and use graphics when you talk. And this goes back to your part of the presentation as well. So in terms of designing for 3 audiences, we might describe these as like your rabid competitors, workers outside your area, and workers in your general area. So what'd you say?
Rabid is.
Yes, rabid. The people who were like, oh wait, I gotta hurry up and publish before you do. We're competitors. So these are people who are doing something that is basically the same thing you're doing or super close. And so there's a sense of competition. They're going to come regardless of how well or how badly you present your work. They're just going to show up. And they're not your main audience because and I think in this case, you don't need to worry about that. And then workers outside your area. So I think this is helpful for you to think about. In this context, they're like your bonus audience. And so the accessible message is important. They want to be able to walk up and understand what you're saying, that they don't need an MPH in the same department that you're in to understand what you're saying. And that can be helpful for thinking about how to make links beyond your particular field, your group. And so this group requires you to explain the problem and the solution, most definitely. And then workers in your general area. This is your main audience. An accessible presentation is helpful. They know your general area and can provide valuable suggestions. But they do require that you supply context for your work. So thinking about, if you had a visitor to your poster who is, in your general field, but maybe sits outside of the School of Public Health, what would you want to make sure is on there? And thinking about people who are here at the School of Public Health, but might be in a different department what would you want to make sure to put on the poster so that they can understand the larger vision of your project and what you learned? So things to include, and not all of these will apply for every poster, but you want to include title, authors' names, your institution or institutions, these different headings and what falls under them, literature cited, acknowledgments, direction to further information. That could be in the form of a QR code. So one example of that is if you are presenting on some work that is still in motion, or if you have like a website associated with it. Photographs, figures, tables, quotes, logos, all of these things make a poster more visually appealing. And then consider the poster an aid. You want to practice using it as a way to identify the larger problem that you're addressing with your work, why it's important, and then to tell what you did. You should be familiar with what's on your poster so that like you're not presenting your poster like this while somebody is standing here. So you should be able to just talk about it and know where things are and make eye contact as you do it. No pressure. So in terms of yourself and you and your role in the poster presentation, it's helpful to practice a one-sentence summary so that if somebody says, "What's your poster about?" you can succinctly answer that question in about a minute or less. You should also be able to practice. I don't know if you all have specific guidance about this, Juliet and Hope, of like the length of their poster things they're going to say or no, or.
I offered a bit of guidance.
Okay.
The document that we sent over about posters, but yeah, not this specific guidance.
Okay, so I think it's helpful to be able to give that like succinct summary, to be able to give a 2-minute presentation and potentially a 5-minute, you know, depending on if people like continue to stay and continue to engage with you. It's also helpful to think about what questions people might ask so that you're prepared to answer them. In terms of your own presentation, think about your personal appearance. You know, this is a professional setting, so think about this as what would I wear if I were going to a job interview. If you have any handouts, that might be helpful. I often try to print a copy of my poster small so that somebody can take it with them. In this context, you may or may not want to do that. And especially for those of you who are graduating, cards, but not the kind you play with, more of a business card. And then your demeanor, thinking about how to be inviting without being creepy is like a good thing to practice. So I often tell the story of being at a conference one time where there was somebody who was like basically following people down the aisle to drive them to his poster. I don't mean physically drive, but anyway, like you want to be eager and inviting and not overly so. And I will acknowledge that I think that can be one of the challenges of a poster is you want to be inviting and that can take some effort. And I think there is great value in poster presentations in that they do provide a setting for individual engagement with others and having true conversation in a way that you can't always do with an oral presentation. Some of the nitty-gritty details, and so you all are printing them, so and they've been given guidance about the size and cool. Do you want to say it aloud or no?
The size.
Mm-hmm.
I'll pull it up.
Okay. So some details are that you'll be creating a single large slide in PowerPoint for your poster, and that you can please follow whatever guidance you've gotten from your program manager about what size you're gonna set it for. And I think I will say that I know people love a Canva, and it can sometimes get messy when we try to get too like exciting with our font choices. As I'm sure some of you have at points discovered when you're presenting in class. And so this is not the time to do that. So before you add content to your PowerPoint slide, go into the settings and set the slide to whatever dimensions Hope and Juliet and Megan tell you, because that's the size that your poster is going to be. If you change the size of your poster after you've started putting things on it, things may move around and or get distorted. And that always is a bummer. So some visual tips, posters with 800 words or fewer, I don't know why I put less, are ideal. Use your white space. Don't be afraid to have white space. Left justification is easier to read than full justification. So that means all of your words, line them up on the left only, not the left and the right. If you do full justification, it makes it harder for the eye to keep track of what line you're on. And then photographs or other graphics should have a thin gray or black border to make them more visually appealing so that they pop from the background. 1-inch margins around the edge. And again, these are the nitty-gritty details. So please do refer back to these. Leave at least a 1-inch margin around the edges of the poster, and then use grid lines. You can turn on your grid lines in your slide to line things up, because while you're looking at it on your screen, you're like, yeah, it's lined up. And then you print it and it's much larger and you're like, oh, it's not really. And it becomes distracting to the viewer. In terms of the background of your poster, generally you're going to go with white or something very close to. So like stay focused on these inner parts of this color wheel. It is hard to print at both at high quality, but also for people to be able to read it if you start to get too far from the center of this. Other visual tips, try to avoid titles with colons. Format the title in sentence case, meaning capitalize the first word and any other words that would normally be capitalized, but don't capitalize every word. Use a non-serif font, meaning without, so this is a serif font with these lines underneath. These rules are changing over time as we have become a society that has more non-serif font happening, but it can sometimes be easier to follow along here. And then use different font sizes and boldings to indicate what's your header, what's your body text. If you can, avoid underlining because it adds more clutter, visual clutter. And these are just some suggestions for potential fonts to use, sizes to use, and depending on the size of your poster, you're going to scale it down. These are more based on conference size posters, which are pretty big. So that's some more about that. Don't use, like anything, we know, don't use all caps. It's like yelling at people. So try to avoid that whenever possible. And then familiar fonts are easier for your audience to read and for other computers to print, depending on what fonts are installed wherever your poster is being printed. You don't want to set yourself up for things looking the way you didn't expect them to do because you're using a fun and exciting font that is installed in very few places. So visuals, use visuals to enhance your message. If you have numerical data, turn it into a graph. If you have quotes from focus groups, use word bubbles. Again, use a border around photographs, and then all graphs, tables, figures, maps, and photographs should be labeled so that they can stand alone. So any questions right now? Okay. What'd you say? Okay. So these are just a few examples that we're going to take a look at. Thoughts on this poster? Yeah. Oh, sorry. So this is left justified throughout, and you should have multiple columns. So that's good. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. So it's not so much that all of your text should go on the left side, but that when you have your text, line it up on the left side. Yeah, thank you. Other comments? How do you guys like this poster? Thoughts, feelings?
Good white space.
Good white space, okay.
I like how they included the images of performers and stuff.
Okay. Yes. So we know that they're talking about fish, because otherwise, like, they could be talking about flopping around, floundering. Sorry. Is that where that comes from? So some of the positive points: the title conveys the main message instantly. The context and objectives are made clear. I mean, we didn't delve into reading all of this, but we see that the graphs have titles, so we can easily see what they're supposed to be about. Color scheme is simple and pleasing. Font is large enough. Some people thought, in terms of negative points, some people thought the title could be more direct. So instead of Southern Flounder exhibit temperature-dependent sex determination, it could have been simplified into temperature-determined sex of Southern Flounder. And this is actually not following the rule of sentence case. Determines that sex should be lowercase. And some people felt like it was maybe a little too much white space, but whatever. Okay. Thoughts on this one?
Not enough white space.
Not enough white space. Okay. The blue is a lot. Any other? A font? What about it?
I think some not structured as objectives, methods, things.
So it's hard to know. It's hard to follow the poster. Okay. Any other?
All the text is bolded. Yes.
Okay. So bold text without no. So it's like trying to. Is it saying everything's important? We'll find out. Okay. So some positives about the poster. It asks an interesting question: can suburban greenways provide quality bird habitat, high quality bird habitat? There were some nice images. Color scheme is simple. Font is generally large enough. But some negatives: it appears crowded, lacking white space. The graphs, especially the 4 scatter plots, are too small. So, like, it's hard to see this. These heading blocks, there's a lot going on there with the blue and the, and it's not clear, like, what was is going to be in each section. And some of them are too long. And not, as you pointed out, like, you're not really sure how the poster is organized. And I think it's helpful to look at different posters so that you can get a sense of, like, what to do more of and maybe what to do less of. Thoughts on this one? The background is distracting. What else? What'd you say?
The graphs are just.
The graphs are too small. Okay. Anything else? The font is small, and what? The pictures are lacking.
The bullet points are like right up against the box.
Okay, like not enough margin in the cells. Okay. So some positive points, and these are from like a study or like focus groups with people, not that I did, giving feedback. So people liked this best lion in the background, and the large title, and that the sections, you know what's happening in each of them, and that the author has their contact information. Some of the negative points that the text is heavy, so that goes back to like not enough graphics. It's hard to read the text over the lion, and that there's each graph, there's not pertinent text. So you see this cluster of graphs, but you're not really sure what each of them is. Some question about this graphic and its meaning, intent. And then really the author's name, it's nice that we know how to contact them, but it should have been at the top with the title. So this is a Colin Purrington is a he has a website where you can like see various examples, which I find are helpful. So this is a template where he, includes title formatted in sentence case that hints at an interesting issue and or methodology, doesn't spill onto a third line ideally, and isn't hot pink. The name, contact information, and I would encourage, these links are live in the PDF, which will be shared with you. And I appreciate that, like, looking at a template, there's also some humor worked into it. So the introduction starts with, congratulations, a reader was mildly intrigued by your title. Now you have 2 to 3 sentences to hook him or her into reading more by describing what your question was and why the answer might be of general interest. Gratuitous background information will cause them to walk away. If you're standing next to your poster, that can be awkward. So I would encourage you to check out his site for some examples and some explanations as to why things are set up. But you can see here that it's easy to follow. One nice thing about this particular template is that we have the 3-column version: intro, materials and methods, results with a wider column here, conclusions, and then the bottom part is literature cited, acknowledgments, and further information. And again, this is a good setup for a large conference poster where you have a poster that's 6 feet wide and 4 feet high. And so with 4 feet of poster, each time a person gets to the bottom of a column, they need to bend down a little. So this way, those details are on the bottom. And so you can see the bulk of the poster without bending down. And this is another example of that. And again, you can see with this one, there's some visuals worked in throughout. And so you can think about how that might work for you. This is another format of a poster that I feel like this version, it had a moment a few years ago, and I don't think it really caught on. I still see it sometimes, but anyway, you can think about it if that draws you. But so this is an example of that, where you put like the main message in the center and then put details on the left and the right sides. There's also a version that's portrait. And then this is a Colin Purrington version. So I encourage you to check out these links as well. Matas has library guide around posters if you want to dig into that. You'll also get these slides, and this link goes to the poster templates for the school. I also want to just show you, you'll get this worksheet from Juliet and Hope and Megan as well. So this is just a Word doc that I made a few years ago to help you think about while you're making your poster. So at the top, consider in a sentence or two what's the guiding message of your poster, and then use that to develop these other parts. The title, what is the simplest and most understandable way to say what your project is about? Include your authors, institutions, logos, and then the various pieces of your poster, and then important things.
Can you share actually,
Oh, is that your screen share?
but not this stuff?
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So anyway, for those watching the recording later, guiding message of your poster. So that's not going to go actually on your poster. This part that is in the broken line at the top, but use that as you develop these other parts of your poster. So that is all I have. Questions? Yeah.
So my presentation is going to be based on my ILE, which is a bit new. Do you have any differing advice in terms of how to set up my poster?
So the question is that this individual's poster will be based on their ILE, which is a literature review. And I would say no. I think this all still holds true. Again, think about like, are there graphic ways to depict whatever it is that you're sharing? And that can be a table or a chart. It doesn't need to be a photo per se, but just make sure it's relevant to whatever you're sharing. So yeah, thank you. Other questions? No? Okay, I'm going to stop this. Yes, I'm going to leave.